Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of July 12th, 2021. In accordance with LB 898, please be advised that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber by the northwest door. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a brief period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda, and under public hearing, anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The council shall require any member of the public desiring to address the council to identify themselves, the name of an organization or group, and including any address, and that you may be representing by such a person or group, unless the address requirement is waived to protect the security of the individual. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal, and each speaker should begin by stating their name, their address, their organization, their group, and whether you are speaking in favor of or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last Mondays of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date nor plan for a future agenda, which will be next meeting. Will the clerk please call the first item of business?
Our first item of business for our council meeting for Monday, July 12th, 2021 is our Mayor's Award of Excellence.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Bowers, members of the council. It's so great to be back to celebrate our city teammates, and we are doing that and recognizing the exceptional and excellent work of two individuals today and presenting the Mayor's Awards of Excellence for May and June of 2020. And the award for May of 2020 goes to Control and Instrumentation Technician Russell Murray of Lincoln Transportation and Utilities Wastewater Division. His colleague, Rex Jordan, nominated Russ in the categories of customer relations, productivity, and safety for his role in an electrical infrastructure project. And so as part of our large biogas to energy project at the Teresa Street Water Resource Facility, the city needed to make some electrical infrastructure improvements in order to serve the new compressed natural gas, or CNG, facility and equipment. LTU called upon Russ to execute many of these electrical improvements, and he planned and coordinated a series of complex steps necessary to accommodate construction and maintain critical water recovery operations in the event of lengthy power outages. And those steps involved the identification of alternate routes for Lincoln Electric System's overhead power lines, redistribution of internal substation electricity, and preparations to incorporate temporary standby electricity for the entire facility. Russ's coordination efforts involved working closely with multiple project partners and professional disciplines that include LES's engineers and transmission line staff, Commonwealth Electric, Nebraska Machinery, HDR, and Olson's engineering firms, in addition to several LTU wastewater staff and managers. And in his nomination of Russ, Rex wrote that this was a significant undertaking for everyone involved, and the project was finished successfully in large part due to Russ's thorough planning, his communication, and attention to detail, which included the safety of all of those involved as they worked with high voltage infrastructure. Rex also stated that because of Russ's leadership, knowledge of the facility's electrical infrastructure, and commitment to excellence in his work, the project was successful, and I quote, without flaw. Many people deserve credit for the successful effort, but Russ was the most valuable player on the team. Please join me in welcoming Russ up to the lectern for his award and to thank him for his hard work and commitment to the city of Lincoln. LTU Director Liz Elliott would like to say a few words about Russ. Do you want to come forward and speak?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, council members. I'll keep this short, but I did want to just express my appreciation and appreciation on behalf of the entire team at LTU To Russ, thank you for all that you do, not only with this project, but day in and day out. Because of your expertise, your dedication to the team, and all of your hard work, this project, along with so many others, run exceptionally smooth and are done perfectly because of this. So he's a tremendous asset and a value to our team and our department. So thank you for everything, Russ.
You're quite welcome.
Would you like to say a few words?
As you say, I'm Russ Murray. I've been with the city. This is my 34th year. I just want to say a few thanks to you, Council, first and foremost, for having me here as a guest. Obviously, I'd like to thank all the entities that were involved in this project. It took about 6 months of planning and a week to implement this plan. With 52 pairs of boots on the ground, trying to keep them all separated with the pandemic was not an easy task, and get a lot of work done in a week. The mayor has mentioned all of the partners that are involved. I would also like to thank my supervisors for having the trust in me to take on such a adventure for me. And of course, Liz and the Honorable Mayor. I would really like to thank the mayor. She's new to us, came in with the pandemic and hit the ground running. And my personal note to you is I very much appreciate you continuing this program. This is my 3rd Mayor's Award that I have received, and I just want to express that I feel this program should continue because it's very valued. It gives an employee a very high self-esteem and a pride in his work, and makes him want to continue doing that. So thank you, Mayor, for doing that.
Thank you, Russ. I just want to say it's one of my favorite parts about being the mayor is getting to highlight the incredible work of our city employees. And if you look at our budget this year, you'll see pictures of people doing their excellent work despite all the extraordinary challenges. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to present the Mayor's Award of Excellence for June 2020 to Senior Traffic Technician Shane Dostell from the LTU's Engineering Services Division. Shane was nominated by Senior Engineering Technician Harry Kroos in the categories of Customer Relations, Productivity, and Safety due to his enduring efforts to coordinate traffic at important health and safety events during the pandemic. In spring of 2020, Shane became the employee charged with traffic coordination and messaging associated with the COVID-19 testing sites. Due to issues with bidding an on-call traffic control contract, Shane performed barricading for both Parks and Recreation and LTU street closures. And furthermore, with a number of employees teleworking, Shane became the primary contact for contractors on city projects. These activities required Shane to be on call at all hours, something that goes far beyond the normal obligations and duties associated with his position. His exceptional commitment and dedication resulted in significant cost savings. And in his nomination, Harry stated that Shane's positive attitude and efforts are recognized by internal and external agencies throughout Lincoln. He feels that Shane's efforts are unmatched within the LTU department. In his nomination, a second. Oh, I'm missing a page. Sorry about that. At this time, I would like to call Shane forward so that I can present him with the award. And would LTU Director Liz Elliott like to say a few words again?
Yay. Many of you have probably met Shane at one point or another. He does tremendous work on the events planning committee, but during the pandemic, he just went above and beyond even his tremendous amount of work that he does every day. Everyone that I know enjoys working with Shane. He is extremely organized, extremely pleasant, even when dealing with frustrated situations. And And we always get compliments on the great work that Shane does, whether it was from Brian during the vaccination clinics or to all of the testing sites. He does an extraordinary job day in and day out. And so thank you on behalf of the whole team for all that you do, Shane. So thank you.
Thanks, Benny. and thanks, Jane. As you know, I'm usually not the favorite person in the room on certain projects and construction zones around Lincoln. So, everybody wants, as you guys all know, the road's done today with a 1-day notice and no interruption in their travel home. But I really want to thank Harry Cruz for nominating me. This is the first time and I've been with the city for 24 years. And the last 10 has been with construction, special events, and things like that. And I guess I want to probably thank the mayor too, because
Probably.
there's all the work that went in. What's that? All the work that went in with the health department and the vaccination clinics and stuff like that. I worked pretty closely with the health department and all the fluid sites that were around town between, doing it at PBA, doing it at Sporting Village, then going out to the Lancaster Event Center and just making that transition all the time. And the health department was good with me for that. And we provided them with lots of signage, lots of barricading, lots of message boards so people could get to the vaccination sites. And like I said, I want to thank Harry. There weren't that many of us around during the pandemic that were actually in the office and actually in the field. So it was a difficult time, but Harry did just as much as I did, and some other people in our office were there most of the time too. So I hope that we never have to go through this again. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, because this was a time when a lot of things still had to continue to be done, even though the pandemic was going on. And so once again, I'd like to thank you for all that you do for us too. So
Thank you. We got so many compliments about how easy it was to pull up to the arena for vaccinations and to other sites, and it really is a tremendous tribute to you and your team.
thanks.
Thank you.
All righty.
All right. Please join me in
Thank you so much, Mayor, and congratulations, and thank you for your service to all the award winners. We wouldn't be able to function as a city without you. Okay, we'll move on with the next item on our agenda.
Our next item on the agenda is our consent agenda, sections 1 and 2.
Is there anyone that wishes to speak on any of these items?
Hi, this is Adele Burke from the Mayor's Office, and I'm just coming forward to introduce Angel Geller, who will be appointing to the Commission on Women and Gender. Angel, I don't know if you're out here. Do you want to come up? And we're just really excited to have her serve on the Commission on Women and Gender. She's an Indigenous artist in our community, and she's been really involved in our community, so we're excited to have her perspective. So if you just want to, say a few words about why you want to serve.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Angel, and I'm really proud and honored to have this opportunity to serve. Born and raised in Lincoln, and hoping to bring a fresh Indigenous perspective. Thanks so much.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much for your willingness to serve.
Yes.
Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on any of these items for items 1 and 2? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to voting on the consent items.
Item 1A is appointing Angel Geller to the Commission on Women and Gender for a term to expire November 23rd, 2022, introduced by Shob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Beckius,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Shob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1B is reappointing Kyle Biggerstaff to the Board of Mechanical Examiners for a term to expire April 4th, 2024, introduced by Shob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Raybold?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1C is approving the distribution of funds representing interest earnings on short-term investments of idle funds during the month ended May 31st, 2021, introduced by Ward.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Washington. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Washington?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1D is resolution levying the special taxes assessed for the cost of the improvements in the College View Business Improvement District, Havelock Street Maintenance Business Improvement District, North 27th Street Maintenance Business Improvement District, South Street Maintenance Business Improvement District, University Place Maintenance Business Improvement District, and West O Street Maintenance Business Improvement District, introduced by Ward.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Washington. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Ward?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 2A was introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman McGinnis. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Beckius?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, we'll move on to our next section, please.
Section 4 is our public hearing liquor resolutions. I'll be calling items 4A, application of Blur Parties, Inc., doing business as Blur Parties for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 160 feet by 135 feet, located at the parking lot on the northeast corner of 9th Street and T Street on August 13th and 14th, 2021, from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m.
Is there anyone that would like to speak on this item? Thanks. And please state your name and address once you get up here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Council. Yes, again, my name is Stacy Lenners. I'm here on behalf of Blur Parties. We're at 2501 West L Street here in Lincoln. We're requesting consideration for an SDL at the corner of 9th and S Street on August 14th for a hospitality event we'd like to host before and during the Garth Brooks concert in Memorial Stadium. We're an event production company, and I saw you about 6 months ago here, where we had one event last year, unfortunately, with the pandemic, and we're lucky to be back in business this fall. So this will be our first event that we're attempting to host here in August. Yeah, fingers crossed. So I have reached out to Ben Davey over at the health department just to let him know kind of what we're doing and, advice on any particular items he'd like to see. We've gone ahead and put on hold. I've got security from Frazee and Associates. We use them for all of our events. We've got off-duty officers. It will be an open to the public event. However, we're looking to do as much as we can to have pre-purchased tickets. So we just have attendees that are already ready for the day versus having a lot of show-ups at the door. And so the particular location, we actually have somewhat of an infrastructure there. We've been hosting private corporate events on Husker game days in the same spot for over 12 years. And so we've invested in a lot of equipment under and around this space. And so we're going to utilize that space along with some additional square footage for this particular event to be open to the public. So we're going to have some GA tickets for entry. We're going to have entertainment, some country music, lawn games. We've got TVs, things of that nature, and then we're going to have a VIP space as well, which we work with Chef Off Chef Catering. He works with us with a lot of our events, and he's going to be doing some catering for our VIP guests, and then have some concession food as well available to the other guests, so they have something to eat while they're consuming beverages. Do you have any questions?
Are there any questions?
No.
Seeing none, thank you so much.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, please.
Item 4B is application of Premier Catering, doing business as Premier Catering for a special designated license to cover an indoor and outdoor area measuring approximately 900 feet by 755 feet at the UNL Memorial Stadium, located at 1 Memorial Stadium Drive on August 13th, 2021 from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. and August 14th, 2021 from 8 a.m. to 11:45 p.m.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Harrison. I am the applicant for the application, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none.
None?
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, please.
Item 4C and 4D I'll call together. Application of SMG Food and Beverage LLC for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 700 feet by 448 feet at Pinewood Bowl at 3201 South Coddington Avenue on September 7th from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m., September 8th from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m., and September 22nd from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. And the application of SMG Food and Beverage for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 232 feet by 175 feet at Pinnacle Bank Arena, 400 Pinnacle Bank Arena Drive on August 7th from 12 p.m. to 12 a.m.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Lorenz, General Manager at Pinnacle Bank Arena, and thank you for the opportunity to come up and speak to you today. So the first three applications are for our shows at Pinewood Bowl. We've so far been able to do 4 shows out at Pinewood Bowl, 2 moved inside because of weather. There's one other one that has already been granted an SDL. That would be August 10th, Willie Nelson and Avett Brothers. But these 3 are for Cheryl Crow on September 7th, 311 on September 8th, and Shinedown on September 22nd. This is, I think, our 9th year at Pinewood Bowl, and it's been amazing. The city has put some additional infrastructure out there. It's so much fun to be there, and it's just a perfect place. So the applications are very standard for what we're doing. The area is fenced. We have all of our server sellers have their server seller licenses. Our pricing is probably towards the higher end. It also tends to slow some consumption a bit, and so it's just been a pleasure to be able to do that. The second piece of application, it would be the 4D, is for a thing called Beach Bash. And Beach Bash is done with the Cornhusker Parrothead Club. They've had it before over in Rail Yard. We're going to do it out in front of Pinnacle Bank Arena this time. They're an organization, and their motto is basically a party with a purpose. And so they raise funds for different local organizations. They've already committed funds this time for this event to People's City Mission and also to the Malone Center. So it's a older demographic, goes from 5 till about 10:30. We'll do it right in the plaza in front. We'll do the fencing that's required. We'll open up the inside. People can go inside and cool off, use the restrooms there. And it should be a very nice event. You'll want to write this on your calendar. It's Jimmy and the Parrots is one of the bands, and Bamboozlers is the other one. And it's just basically a fun event. Entry fee is $10, and again, they're raising all their money to go to charity. Any questions we can answer for you?
Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much for
Great.
coming down.
Thanks, you guys.
Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, please.
Item 4E is application of Playmakers Bar and Grill for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 86 feet by 100 feet at Playmakers Bar and Grill at 640 West Prospector Court on July 17th, 2021 from 12 p.m. to 10:30 p.m.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Stevenson. I'm here for Playmakers. And this is going to be a rib fest, actually, for us. And we're going to mark off the space that she's speaking of. It's just going to be where the food vendors are, and it'll be fenced off as well. And we're only going to sell beer out there. So it's just going to be like grab a rib, grab a beer, and then there's going to be a band until 10 o'clock because we have a noise ordinance out there. It's a residential kind of area. Other than that, I think we're in good shape. You guys got any questions?
Can we just get your address for the record, please?
My personal address?
Business address is fine.
What was it? She just said it. Sorry, it's 640 West Prospector?
Yes,
Yeah.
nailed it.
Perfect.
All right.
Sorry.
Are there any questions at this time?
Mic off.
Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Anyone else that wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, please.
I'll be calling items 4F, application of Yin Family LLC doing business as Hero 88, The Bar at the Yard LLC doing business as Longwells, Yard Investments LLC doing business as Gate 25 to temporarily expand their Class C, CK, E, and I liquor licenses for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 40 feet by 293 feet at 350 Canopy Street, 601 R Street on July 17th from 2 a.m. to 12 a.m.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Smith. I'm with Hey Mike. We're taking over new management of the entertainment district down in the rail yards. This is my first time presenting to everyone, so be gentle and hello, I guess is what I'll say. But we've got Welcome to Lincoln Day. It's the National High School Rodeos in town. I'm sure everybody saw the news of what happened at Lancaster, but they've recovered, and we're throwing a Welcome to Lincoln Day event for the contestants and the families, and it's a pretty family-friendly event. And so, yeah, we're closing down Canopy Street, and it's Glenn Templeton's a country singer that the rodeo sponsored to bring in for the kids to listen to. There's things like tetherball and roping for the kids, and the adults will be in the yard. And so we kind of have a kids section in the back and an adult section off on another side. And so the event goes from 4 to 10, should be wrapped up because they've got an early start that next day. But that's the event down in the rail yard.
Are there any questions?
No.
Councilman McGinnis?
I have one quick question. It says it's from 2 a.m. to 12 a.m.?
Correct. I think we just needed time to set the stage up the night before for the band. So that was why
Close the street down so you can set the stage up.
Yeah, and then we'll tear it down. He's done at 10, and then we'll close up after that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Can we just get your address for the record, please?
Oh, my bad. It is 3500 Canopy Street.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, can we move on to the next item, please?
Item 4G is application of HCJ LLC doing business as Bourbon Street to temporarily expand their Class C and E liquor license for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 40 feet by 293 feet at 350 Canopy Street, 601 R Street on July 17th from 2 a.m. to 12 a.m.
Is there anyone here that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the next section then, please.
We can vote on these items.
Ready? Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we adopt items I lost my place. 4A through 4G.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Washington. Any discussion?
I think it's wonderful that we had a whole raft of SDL applications this week. It means that we're open again for business.
We're back, baby.
Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
McGinnis?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Okay, our next section is section 5, our public hearing resolutions. Item 5A and 5B I will call together. Miscellaneous 21006, application of the Urban Development Director declaring the Northwest 48th Street redevelopment area generally bounded by Fletcher Avenue on the north, Northwest 57th Street on the west, Holdridge Street on the south, and Northwest 48th Street on the east as blighted and substandard. And the related miscellaneous 21007, application of the Urban Development Director to declare the Northwest 48th Street area bounded by Fletcher Avenue on the north, Northwest 57th Street on the west, Holdridge Street on the south, Northwest 48th Street on the east as extremely blighted, as set forth in extremely blighted determination study for the city of Lincoln, dated January 2021.
So before we start with city staff, what we'll have is we'll have city staff testify first, and then we'll open up to a public hearing. Remember, when we come up, just please say your name and your address for city staff and public that will be speaking. Once we get through that testimony public hearing portion of it, there are 3 other items that we need to get to before we vote or do any amendments on the voting.
Good afternoon, Dan Marvin, Urban Development, 555 South 10th Street. I might sound a little redundant from what I talked about a couple of weeks ago, but forgive me. We're going to, first I want to clarify, because I've seen emails and other correspondence that this has something to do with tax increment financing. And what's before you now doesn't have to do with TIF or tax increment financing. It has to do with an opportunity to let people fill out this form, which is a 1040N-EB, extremely blighted. If you are in an extremely blighted area, you can access this and you can avail yourself of a $5,000 tax credit for an owner-occupied residence. The last time we talked about this, I put this image down in front, was something from an evicted demonstration over at the Nebraska History Museum, showed a bunch of door handles. 37 of them are yellow and 63 of them are don't know what that color is, kind of a copper color. And what the image says to the side is that in 2016, 37% of homes purchased in the United States were purchased as rentals. I think what the legislature with LB 86, which was passed in 2019, was trying to recognize that we want to give people an opportunity who are going to be owner-occupieds a chance at being able to move into a home. I'm not suggesting that that in and of itself is going to solve the problem that people have being owner-occupieds getting into homes, but it's something that we should try to avail ourselves of if we can. And these areas that we did last week or 2 weeks ago, Belmont, and this area qualified as extremely blighted when we did the study. Here's a map from CHE that kind of identifies the Arnold Heights area. That to be extremely blighted, you have to meet certain poverty and unemployment numbers, which those areas provide, and also the Belmont area did as well. What I didn't share with you the last time we were here was Kurt Elder in my office in 2020, March of 2020, so you can kind of see how quickly the wheels of government move. But in March of 2020, shortly after this body had done the blue areas that are identified on this map, which were areas that had previously been blighted but had not been declared extremely blighted, this body went and we did the study, and we took that before you in January of 2020, and those areas were declared extremely blighted, which again allowed those homeowners in those blue areas the opportunities to get the $5,000 tax credit. In March of last year, we started having meetings. We said, well, where did we miss? And the red areas are areas that were potential areas of doing extremely blighted. And what we did was we tried to identify the largest areas to give us the biggest bang for a buck to be able to do extremely blighted in those areas as well. So that kind of tells us what this is. I'm not going to suggest to you that TIF at some point will never come into play, but for TIF to come into play, tax increment financing, for that to come into play, we would have to bring to this body a redevelopment plan to address both the Belmont area, which you previously approved, or the Arnold Heights area. And within that redevelopment plan, we could put in there values that we cherish and that we want to try to accomplish to address the blight in those particular areas, just like we do with any other established blight area. Blight plus a redevelopment plan would then allow us to enter into redevelopment agreements with developers, in which case then we would be able to offer tax increment financing. We don't have projects in the area. We don't have a redevelopment plan for Belmont or for Arnold Heights. We would expect that we would do them in the future. I talked to Tim Keelan, who would help us draft both of those documents, and suggested to him that issues that are related to 9 Mile Prairie would need to be critically input into any eventual redevelopment plan for the Arnold Heights neighborhood. Is there a history where we've had long lead times between when an area has been blighted and when there has been a subsequent redevelopment plan? And probably the longest standing one would have been south of downtown. In 2007, that area was declared blighted, and then in 2020, this body approved the redevelopment plan. So there can be large gaps. I'm not suggesting that there would be a 13-year gap on either Belmont or Arnold Heights, but they aren't necessarily brought together concurrently. The tax credit, though, does have an expiration date, and the expiration date for the tax credit is December 31st, 2025, unless the legislature were to extend it. Are there advantages? At some point in the future, are there advantages that urban development believes would be helpful towards ensuring and enhancing the position of 9 Mile Prairie in terms of preserving corridors? And the answer is yes, because it's another layer of scrutiny. It's another bite at the apple, so to speak, of coming through a public process with exactly well-defined program and project to tell people exactly what's going to happen in that area. If you just rezone an area, that rezoned property then can be acquired by somebody and developed. And, you know, when I used to sit on the other side of the table there, people would say, well, how did that car wash get going in there? Did you approve that car wash? And you just have to tell the person, well, no, it was zoned that way. It's private property, and they can do with that private property what the zoning allows. So a redevelopment agreement that would have to be brought through this body is another layer of scrutiny and review that goes on at the Planning Commission level and at this level. Other issues, and there is staff here available to discuss the Huskerville Agreement. I think that's come up. That's a legal agreement. I think the law is here. The 2050 comp plan, and what are the efforts to try to roll 9 Mile Prairie's interest and their 9 Mile environs into the 2050 comp plan. I know David is here. And the climate action plan. Are we violating tenets of the climate action plan? Mickey is here as well. I'll just wrap up with a kind of I know there's motion to amends, and I want to discuss, not that I'm an attorney, but I have had conversations with attorneys, so that almost makes me an attorney.
Express.
The motion to amends, what is available within the blight area is to reduce the size of the area. We can't increase the area. The law department would say you can't go outside the boundaries that the Planning Commission approved, but you can shrink the area and make it smaller. There have been a number of iterations that, again, Kurt's a master at GIS, and he would be able to draft any particular map that someone liked. This particular map would go back to the backyards of what I consider to be the existing Arnold Heights neighborhood. And you can shrink it to that. You can shrink it to any level. TIF, though, needs to be spent within the boundaries of that blight area. So I think that that's something as well. If there are funds that would be helpful for 9 Mile Prairie, trails, for instance, the construction of trails, if those are resources that TIF can provide, then we would be happy to be able to negotiate those into a redevelopment agreement. As a matter of fact, this body recently approved, when the NEBCO redevelopment agreement came through, monies that go for a bicycle trail on Lincoln Mall and monies that went to repair the irrigation system on Lincoln Mall. These are, again, public improvements that can be done. And we're in the process right now of doing a rather large connection of a trail that is going to extend along West O all the way over to Northwest 48th Street, so that we can address connectivity issues between the Arnold Heights neighborhood and the rest of the downtown. Those, again, are resources that are only available through the use of tax increment financing. So I think there are resources that are available, but there's also a multitude of ways of addressing this, and I want people to be crystal clear here, our goal here was to bring forward an opportunity for people to access a $5,000 tax credit. Thank you. Any questions?
Are there any questions for Director Marvin?
Dr. Marvin, may I use that last map that you had?
This one?
Please.
I'll just leave it up here.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the city that would like to come and speak? Okay. Oh. Councilman Washington?
Could we have David Curie come forward? I saw him rising slowly, but thank you.
David Carey, Director of the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street.
Mr. Curie, could you talk a little bit about the 2040 comprehensive plan, the Huskerville Agreement, and so far as it's planning related, and the 2050?
Sure.
And the environment study. Just wrap it all up.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to that. So I'll start with a little bit of history before I get into the comprehensive plan discussion. So the 2007 Huskerville Agreement, that I can lean on my city attorney office friends if I go astray of the facts here, but that was signed by the city and LPS and the Airport Authority in 2007 when the Arnold Heights Elementary School new site was being identified and purchased and eventually developed and built, obviously. That was in late 2006 and early 2007. By May and June of 2007, the properties that were identified in that agreement for the R3 and the R5 residential zoning on the two parcels that are identified in that agreement, that came through the Planning Commission and the City Council for approval, and that's how the zoning was approved in 2007. So the zoning has been in place since 2007 for residential development on those parcels of interest. That's just so that you have that background. As far as the 9 Mile Prairie environs, which I think most of us have read that, hopefully, that process really kicked into gear in 2018. There was a point in time where the Airport Authority was asking for the surplus property of the parcels that are identified in that agreement from 2007, which is identified as their ability to request that and go through the process. That process began in 2018, went to the Planning Commission, was given approval at the Planning Commission, and then stopped at the City Council, did not come forward to the City Council. It was at that moment that the understanding was that there needed to be some study done of the 9 Mile Prairie environs, and the result of that is the study that was published a little over a year ago in 2020. That is a very good plan. It has a lot of great information. The Planning Department was involved in those discussions. We've been having discussions with 9 Mile Prairie since 2018 actively about kind of what topics should be discussed, what we're discussing in the environs plan, and then that has now worked itself into the update of the comprehensive plan. And so we've had a lot of discussion during the update process of that about 9 Mile Prairie, and we have specific action items and actionable items coming forward as in that draft. And I will just show you one image that I think is going to be very helpful to this conversation today, just so that everyone has this information available. And what you see here is on the top map is the L Plan 2040 existing land use. It's this map here. What you see here is the 9 Mile Prairie environs in the dark green, and dark green identifies in the land use as environmental resources. What we are proposing as a result of all these conversations that have happened, and they've been very, very useful conversations, in an effort in the land use part of this discussion to identify and protect more land moving forward as part of our plan in the 2050 plan, is to add more of those natural areas and those connectors, which is the highest level of importance from the environs plan for 9 Mile Prairie. So what you see in the bottom map here is the proposed 2040 land use plan. What you see is a lot more of these drainage ways in the dark green, those environmental resources, a lot more land in this area as well. So we are proactively saying that should be part of our new 2050 plan. So that is a very important piece of that, and those conversations and the process is ongoing as well. So I think that I just want to make sure that that history was all kind of part of the discussion today so that we had that to work from.
Mr. Carey, just for my visual help, would you please expand the size of that map so that we could see 2050 a little bit bigger.
That might be the full extent of the Zoom. Sorry. Well, this is just that area.
Okay.
I can certainly create another map that allows for you to see the context of the full city. But this is the area that identifies the Arnold Heights area, and as well as going out to 9 Mile Prairie.
Are there any other questions for Director Carey? Councilman Raybold?
Could you go into a little bit more detail about the Huskerville Agreement and what was the purpose of the Huskerville Agreement and who has the authority to surplus the land? And can you talk a little bit about the zoning elements that were implemented in the Huskerville Agreement?
I will preface my comment and answer to that I am not an attorney. I'm a planner, but I have attorney friends that they can certainly jump up and help me if they so deem necessary. That agreement basically established who has the rights to properties that were involved in the area to identify the new Arnold Elementary School site, which obviously LPS ended up purchasing that site and building the school, and that's what's out there today. So the parties to that also, in addition to the LPS, was the City of Lincoln and the Airport Authority. And that agreement basically establishes that on 2 parcels, one to the north of the school site and one immediately to the west of it, that they have the right to surplus that land and sell that land. That's a very shortened explanation of that, what that establishes. That agreement also included explanations of what the intention is of those parcels, and specifically says that the zoning will be changed to residential for future residential use. That's how the next step happened later in 2007, where the change of zone came forward as a result of that agreement, and did indeed change the zoning to those 2 parcels to R3 for the area to the west of the school, and R5 to the area to the north of the school.
So could you explain what R3 is and R5?
Sure. R3 is kind of your typical suburban single-family development that you see on the edges of the community. And then R5 allows for the opportunity for multifamily, which would likely, in that parcel, would likely see some type of multifamily on that northern piece.
So then when you say who gets to surplus it and who gets the benefit of the sale of the land?
My understanding is that the surplus is the right of the surplus is for the Airport Authority to come forward and request that. And then with that surplus, they would have the rights to sell the land.
And then the Airport Authority gets the money?
Yes.
Okay. And then is there anything specific in the Huskerville Agreement that talks about fair market value?
I don't recall if that actual language is in the agreement. I don't think it is, but I don't know if I could say that I know for sure on that. I know that topic has come up because that is part of what the Airport Authority's operations is based on, and I think that they are represented here today, that perhaps they should be asked that question directly.
So is it fair to say the intention of the Huskerville Agreement was to create some type of housing that would complement Arnold Heights Elementary School?
I think the intention of the actual agreement is to provide the opportunity for the Airport Authority to sell the land. However, within those discussions, our plans go back to the 1994 plan to imply that residential would happen around that area for certain. So that was a context provided to that, yes.
Is that pretty typical for most Lincoln Public School construction and buildings and new schools that are constructed to have residential surrounding them, or?
Yes, especially elementary schools.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman McGinnis?
I can clear up, I was part of the school board when we put that project together and that deal. And yes, that was our intent, is to have a housing in a neighborhood surrounding the middle schools and elementary schools. And if you look at all the new elementary sites and everything being built, they're always kind of in the middle of the residential area. And so that was kind of the intent. I have a few other questions, but it might be for law.
I have one more question.
Councilman Raybold?
Can you explain why putting in tax increment financing or declaring an area blighted why is that important in terms of regulation? Or I think someone mentioned it earlier, Dan probably mentioned it earlier, about what authority do we on the city council have when something, an entity wants an area to be blighted and wants to use tax increment financing?
Well, I think I'll start, and then Dan can come up at any time to answer that as well. To start with, I just want to reiterate that what is in front of you is the blighted and substandard, not TIF, not a redevelopment plan. So not to say that that wouldn't happen in the future for an area that is blighted and substandard identified. But the benefit of doing that, or having that opportunity anyways, is, and Dan mentioned this earlier, it does allow for an additional level of review for a project. Let's just say that there was a housing proposal for these areas that we're discussing. A blighted, substandard, and then redevelopment plan, and then redevelopment project and agreement would be another level of review for this body to go through and make sure that it's the type of project that you're looking for. For example, affordable housing could be put in play there. And then we would have some type of incentive for that project to happen, but it could happen or would happen in a certain way that we, as the city, and you as a deciding body, would want to see it happen. That'd be one advantage to that. Another advantage would be if one of these drainage areas that is identified in our proposed plan that is being given that heightened level of land use identification, that not only can we take that information and say that should be preserved, but perhaps we could take some funding from TIF to build a connector trail to 9 Mile Prairie and back, so that the neighborhood can have that connection. Those are the types of things that would be considered.
Didn't we do something similar with Wyuka, where there was ground right next to the cemetery, and then we made a requirement for maintaining a public access, public easement, so that people could access the trail and take the hikes around the cemetery like they've always have in the past?
Yeah, and I know that there also was TIF funding used to pave one of the streets involved in that project to make sure that the project was done the best way possible. Those are the types of examples of, yes, use of the...
Was that area also declared blighted too, in order to qualify for the tax increment financing, or no?
I would ask Dan to talk about the history of that site, just so that we get the best answer on that.
Well, that one was blighted, and then we brought forward at the same time a redevelopment plan for that area at the same time. But so it was declared blighted and extreme blighted, and then a redevelopment plan all at the same time.
But then the city council also requested and required that the public access be
Right.
included and that easement to allow people to continue to use the pathways.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct, and that will be in the redevelopment plan, the easement, a document to illustrate the path through there.
So basically, not that we have, well, I'll just say it, we have the authority to flex our muscle and make certain requirements in any redevelopment agreement that requires tax increment financing, within reason. Within reason.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
Okay.
Councilman Beckius?
And just so we're all on the same page here, if a developer were to buy the land to develop, it's zoned currently, but they are only interested in market rate product, could you explain the power that the city council may or may not have in terms of the issues that we've been speaking of here today?
Yeah, and those parcels could come forward with a proposal that fit the parameters of the R3 zoning, existing R3 zoning and the existing R5 zoning, and they would have a lot of options by right to propose a project and a plan for those properties and then move forward with a project. They would still have to come through for approvals, but if they're proposing something within those regulations, they would be able to move forward with that.
So in short, if it were a market rate project, the issues, the protections that we've been speaking of here today would be a moot point if they're...
Right.
Yes.
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 That's true.
I think that's an excellent point to make. I mean, the way I've been thinking about this is that we know with a certain amount of certainty that if we declare this area, whatever area we define, as extremely blighted, we know that they're capable of filing a 1040N EB in the event that they purchase a home that they live in. past that, things become more speculative to the point where, yes, someone could just buy it as R3 property, as is done all over Lincoln, and they can locate homes and do all the other home development that they'd like to be able to do.
So to follow up on Councilmember Beckius' line of thought, if we really wanted to have more control, it would be in our interest to declare it blighted, with the possibility or the likelihood that some developer or some purchaser would like to take advantage of tax increment financing. We've seen it happen a lot with multifamily housing, not so much with single family, but we could declare it blighted, and then somebody might say, well, I'm not interested in the tax increment financing, and just go ahead and build market rate housing. Is that fair?
You're creating the opportunity for something to happen, but you're not ensuring that it will happen.
Yeah. The only concern that I just wanted to make sure that people understand is that that option's not within our purview. That option is within the developer's purview. And so while we're creating the opportunity, we're not creating the requirement.
Are there any further questions for Director Carey or Director Marvin before we bring up City Attorney?
Fine.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. And then I will ask for City Attorney Johan C. Christie to come up, please. Councilman McGinnis.
Yes, Mr. Christie. My questions will be a little bit about Lincoln Housing Authority.
Okay.
And since they own a good piece of the ground there, and I'll kind of ask my questions and then you can figure out if you can answer them.
I will do my best.
Okay. They own a good chunk of the ground south of there. And one of the concerns when we were on with the public schools was when and how they would be developing some of their ground down there. Who owns Lincoln Housing Authority? Is that the city of Lincoln that owns it, or are they totally a separate entity? And is that considered city ground, or is that considered their ground?
So I don't want to just guess with the Lincoln Housing Authority. I think I have an answer, but what I don't want to do is stand up here and just...
That'd be great. You can get that to me in a later
Yes,
time.
I will. I do want to, just when we were talking about the agreement earlier, I mean, obviously it was adopted by, the Huskerville Agreement was adopted by the council, I think in 2007. It was signed by the mayor a couple days later, and the agreement is, when we're talking about surplus, the agreement says that the city agrees to take the steps that may be necessary when requested by the authority to declare the property surplus. So I just wanted to be clear. I heard the suggestion that maybe it's been declared surplus by that agreement, and just be clear that it's not. We have agreed to take the necessary steps to declare it surplus when requested.
Mr. Chairman, would you repeat that? Did you say shall or may?
Shall.
Shall, okay.
Councilwoman Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Christie, we've heard from both Director Carey and Director Marvin. We've been reminded of what's before us, which I think this council is fully aware. But I want to talk about your advice in terms of communication prior to today, because I've been troubled by what we've done and not done as public officials with that community in Northwest Lincoln and the advocates that we continue to hear from. And even though we may not be required by law to have notified Lincoln Airport Authority in terms of tax increment financing opportunities, or our neighbors, or 9 Mile Prairie advocates, and just to get it on the record, all but I think Councilman McGinnis, and because he was on the Lincoln Board of Education, the rest of us were not even aware of the Huskerville Agreement till 2 days before the last public hearing. So would it not have behooved us, I don't know if this is a legal question, but if you were advising us, would it not have been something we should have done to worked with these groups before this came before the council? Should the administration have not done more due diligence? Should we not be doing more due diligence than to try and wrestle with this even today. So I guess I would like your opinion as to how that should work more appropriately, or how we could have been more agile about this and more sensitive.
Well, certainly, I guess I would start off by saying I think as the city attorney, as the law department, maybe we could have done more to provide additional information to all of you about maybe agreements that were related to the property that was, the issue that was before you. I'm not going to disagree with you when you suggest that the communication, whether it was to the airport authority or other members in the community, if you're hearing that the communication maybe wasn't adequate, I'm certainly not going to disagree with that, and I accept that any suggestion of how we can do that better, make sure that we are communicating with everyone. I do think that now that we have taken some time to look at the Huskerville Agreement, I think we understand it a little bit better and its implications that are there, and also implications that aren't there. I mean, it doesn't really prohibit anything that was presented before. It was good information to have and fully understand it, but I don't think it really changes the proposal that's before the council. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you for that. While it doesn't change things, it does.
It's very good information to have. It's relevant.
And it's part of what's at the table for us. Whether it changes matters or not, it's before us. It's another matter that does maybe not complicate it significantly, but it's certainly under consideration as the council deliberates our next steps. Is that fair from your standpoint?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Raybould?
Just to follow up on Councilwoman Ward's comments, who has to officially request that the land be surplused?
Well, if you're talking about the Huskerville Agreement says that the city agrees to take such steps as necessary when requested by the authority. So that's how the agreement is written. And then
So Lincoln Airport Authority has to request at such time. And then it goes through the City of Lincoln's surplus property procedures.
Correct.
Okay. So I guess going back to Councilwoman Ward's, if we're thinking of going to a blight and development, usually probably the Lincoln Airport Authority should have been included on this discussion, because ultimately they would have to request that of the city to go through that process.
Absolutely, they should have, and maybe I was trying to say that I agree communication should have been better. I don't know where the oversight was with that, but.
Any further questions for City Attorney Johansi Christie? Okay, thank you. Are there any other city staff that need to present? Okay. We will now open it up to the public hearing portion of it. Before we start the public hearing, I just want to say that this process works because we're able to have this conversation with civility and dignity. So please refrain from any outbursts or loud comments so we can have a discussion up here. After the public hearing, city staff will then have a chance to provide a rebuttal. First up for public hearing, would you like to come up and please state your name and your address, please?
My name is Bill Austin. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Blake Austin Law, 301 South 13th Street, Suite 101, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68508. I am here as general counsel for the Airport Authority. We're here just to state that we are in favor of the blight determination as it has been originally proposed from Fletcher to Holdridge. I want to tell you very quickly that while we were surprised 2 weeks ago, a little more than 2 weeks ago, that the airport property was included within the proposed blight study, this is no fault of the staff. They did everything they were supposed to do legally according to the statute. It just so happened, and I would also mention that the title of the property, if you go down and look in the register of deeds, is a little confusing. But we did find out about it, and I think it's fair to say that we're sort of like the guy who walks out the front door of his house and finds that his neighbor is painting his siding. and all of a sudden you go, what the hell is he doing? And you go, hey, that doesn't look so bad. So we're okay with this. So anyway, I think this is, I do want to say that the airport authority is in favor of the Blight Study. I think it's a win-win for everybody. You've heard a number of comments from the staff, and I think that they have pretty much laid out your options. Again, we think that knowing all of that and recognizing that this really does nothing immediate other than open up options to yourselves and to the airport authority and to the community out there, because the tax increment financing is not something that goes to developers. It goes to the city to provide public improvements. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Austin? Seeing none.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sure. And I'm sorry, I meant to tell you, with me is Mr. McNally, Bob McNally, the Director of Operations at the airport.
Are there any statements that you would like to make, Mr. McNally?
No, thank you.
Okay. Oh, Councilman Washington?
Thank you. Thank you. I heard something just about 5 minutes ago that said that in 2018, I think Director Carey had mentioned it, in 2018 the airport authority had come before the Planning Commission and with a proposal that didn't end up coming, it stopped before it came to council, or it stopped at council. Were you going to, do you know if the airport authority was going to request that the city surplus some property in 2018, and that got held back until we got more information?
The airport authority did begin the surplusing process in 2018, made the application, made a request to the planning department. It was placed on the planning commission agenda at that time in about October of 2018. Excuse me. And while there was some statements made by an individual at the time, I think was representing 9 Mile Prairie, I don't know at this point, the planning commission recommended 8-0 to surplus the property. You were yourself on the commission. I noticed in the minutes that you recognized the validity of the Huskerville Agreement, and we were much appreciative of that. It stopped because right after the planning commission meeting, we received a call, and I believe it was from Mr. Dave Carey, indicating that there were some people who were concerned about what effect, if any, this might have on the 9 Mile Prairie. And the airport authority said they would be happy to meet with people to discuss it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rob. There were discussions. There was the indication that they did want to do the 9 Mile Prairie environs study, which was done. It took a lot longer than we had anticipated, but at that point, it was just put on hold because we actually agreed to it. It did not come before the city council at any point. If you saw, and I'm afraid I managed to confuse people because I transmitted, when I was sending the Huskerville Agreement to various parties, a copy of the proposed ordinance declaring it surplus and authorizing the sale. That never went anywhere.
Thank you.
So.
Councilman Shope? Nope. Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Austin or Mr. McNally? Okay, thank you both.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item?
I don't know where to look.
Either of these podiums would be fine.
I'm Nancy Packard, 3030.
You want to move over a little right? There you go.
I'm also hard of hearing, and I'm not quite sure whether 9 Mile Prairie, my comments fit, but I want to say something. I'm Nancy Packard, 3037 Sewell Street in Lincoln, Nebraska. And when I was 3 and 4 years old, I was living in Havelock, but that's beside the, I was living in,
Air Park, Arnold Heights neighborhood?
No, what's the little housing?
Huskerville.
Huskerville.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was living in Huskerville then, but that's beside the point. Then we moved to a farm in York County, and I heard my dad talk about bindweed. You may all know of bindweed. It proliferates everywhere now. You see the flowers everywhere. Yesterday I went to 9 Mile Prairie. If I spread this out, it'd probably go around the room twice. This is just over the fence in 9 Mile Prairie. We simply have to save last itty bits of native prairie. I brought my Weaver book. He says there were 237 different kinds of plants in 1 square mile of 9 Mile Prairie when he was recording that. The prairie, I like to say it took 1,000 years to make a prairie. I don't know how long it was, but over a period of time, the plants that could sustain themselves throughout different temperatures and conditions proliferated, and they grew deep, deep roots, and they culminated in our soils. Nebraska has a wealth of soil and water unlike, I think, almost any place in the world, and we've got to take care of it. We have such little bits of prairie left. We've plowed over and built over most of it. What will we do with those little bits? Do we just make them museums? Well, they might possibly have the source of the next grain we need. They might possibly have the source of the next medication we need for the next coronavirus, plague. We must protect a larger area than those tiny little dabs of prairie. Vineweed would be in the prairie even if we had a large area, because people walk and carry seeds on their shoes, but we have to do our best to not contaminate them any further. I can't even think of an analogy for you. We wouldn't encroach on Memorial Stadium for some little thing. We wouldn't say, well, we'll just take this little corner. We wouldn't take a little corner out of the state capitol and say, well, it's just a little corner. The prairie is so much bigger than that, and we have such a itty-bitty part of it left that we have to maintain it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Ms. Packard? Seeing that, thank you so much for coming down.
Hi, I'm Marilyn McNabb. I live at 1701 West Rose Street. Basically, I could just say what she said was right. I first learned about tallgrass prairie when I was a volunteer with Audubon's Conservation Committee. We would go out under the organization of Vernie Rusick and look at areas that Tim Knott had identified that were tiny remnants of real prairie. And in a few cases, Witchiska was able to buy them. We have 9 prairie remnants ranging from 4 to 40 acres. And we hold 23 easements for owners who want to keep their land protected. One of the things we did was to go to national gatherings of people who care about prairie. And the North American Prairie Conference, which will be here next year, by the way, I remember several people coming up to me when I had my name tag on saying, Lincoln, Nebraska, 9 Mile Prairie, John Weaver. We're famous outside Nebraska. This is really a remarkable place. I'd like to see how low-income housing development can be placed in a cornfield, and here's the difference. In a word complexity, I borrowed some words from a science writer, David Unger, who said, hundreds of species call the prairie home, not just grasses, but mammals, amphibians, reptiles, and birds, and they would not survive without it. A single teaspoon of prairie soil contains more microorganisms than there are people on Earth. In a field of corn and conventional farming, most other life besides corn is scared off, burned off, sprayed off. A polyculture becomes a monoculture. So in that situation, a bulldozer doesn't do any harm because the harm's already been done. And that's where I think we need to put new housing. Now, how did we get the idea there might be new housing too close to the prairie? Well, because a developer came at the last discussion of this and said he already has his plans drawn up for R3 and R7. So it seems to me this is an active issue to be thinking about. The last time experts surveyed and published a report on the plant diversity at 9 Mile Prairie, it was more than 30 years ago. They found 320 native plants, and that's not counting trees and vines. One of the goals of the Climate Action Plan is to create carbon sequestration that would include an analysis of native prairie, a plan for carbon sequestration. We know that deep roots and a diversity of native species increase the stability of carbon sequestration. Thank you for the council for not roaring ahead on this. All of us who jumped into the discussion feel like it's been very confusing. The maps keep changing. And so I'm not even exactly sure what's being proposed today. What a number of groups have been advocating is to stop the change in status at the end, the north end of the housing that's already there, so that we're not affecting future construction. Here's a few thoughts from me, not from Audubon or anybody else. I think climate change is the dramatic drop, and the dramatic drop in species of insects and birds are showing us that we have to establish a different relationship with the natural world. Our current arrangements have afforded us very comfortable lives compared to even a few generations ago. It's hard to make changes, but we have to. More than 30 years, the Brundtland Commission came up with a definition of sustainability that we use today. Is that the end?
You have 1 more minute.
Okay. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. We quote that a lot, but we don't often apply it very well. Almost 50 years ago, a study was published that has been supported by later studies called The Limits of Growth. And I think we are just starting to look seriously now at limits, and that's what's come up with this issue. Thank you very much. Questions?
Are there any questions for Ms. McNabb? Thank you. Seeing none, thank you so much for coming down.
Yep.
My name is Don Nelson. I moved to Lincoln 52 years ago and established a family. We're now in our 4th generation Nebraskans. I'd like to start by thanking all of you for spending so much time on a relatively small issue. You have much more pressing business on your shoulders. I'd also like to thank the city staff for willing to talk, consider, and make a sincere effort to get to a point where none of us in this debate have everything we want, but we've all got the key concept we're interested in secure. Nothing's permanent in Lincoln. If you think back to 1994, what did O Street look like? Not at all like it looks like now. So don't rush to the conclusion that you've got to do something because it's the next step in a logical progression of 100 steps. 52 years ago, the Nebraska Supreme Court granted me a license to practice law in Nebraska. If there's one thing I've learned, is that if lawyers didn't disagree, there would not be a practice of law. I respect my colleagues in the bar. I respect the fact that they've studied and reached an opinion. I'm just here to tell you there are other lawyers in Lincoln that have different opinions on the status of certain parcels of land. I spent 15 years as an investment banker designing financing for low and moderate income housing in Lincoln. Hundreds of projects. I am totally in favor of more affordable housing. And if affordable housing is part of making this terrible and complex set of issues come together, count me in on coming up with a solution for that, because we're still way under where we should be in terms of affordable housing. I hope you can slow the train down so we can all get together and talk one-on-one. This pandemic has been a total barrier to doing business the usual and customary way. I'm probably up to my 300th Zoom call. I would trade every one of those for one face-to-face meeting on this subject and all other subjects. Thank you. I thought that the article in the paper today summarized the complexity of the issues. Everybody's trying to approach it. I don't think there's any bad will on anybody's part, but give us the time and effort to go just a few more steps to get these pieces together, because a prairie is forever. All the other things are not. We want them, but they're not forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from Mr. Nelson?
I don't think I gave you did I give you my address? 2430 South Canterbury Lane.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Winston, and I'm appearing here on behalf of Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light. Our address is 1327 8th Street, Suite 300, Lincoln, Nebraska 68508. Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light supports care for God's creation and actions to address the causes and impacts of climate change. One of the things that I think about when I've lived in Lincoln for nearly as long as Don Nelson has, 51 years. And Lincoln's an exceptional community. It's really a great place to live. And it's not just my opinion. If you look at surveys, there's studies will talk about Lincoln's always in the top 10 of most livable places, best places to live. And typically the kinds of things that they talk about are things like our school system. Tip my hat to Mr. McGinnis, and other. I was on the school board too, so I'll brag a little bit on myself. But we've got a great school system, and we've got great natural amenities, things like our parks, our trails. You think of Pioneer Park, Antelope Park, Holmes Lake, the Wilderness Park, just all the parks and trails that we have. So we have all these natural amenities, and they really enhance our quality of life. And so it's really important that we hang on to those things. And those things didn't just happen. They happened because of conscious decisions by the administration of this city, people like Mayor Basalas and Mayor Beitler and Mayor Wesley and our current mayor. And now you just recently passed the Lincoln Climate Action Plan. And that's a policy that really defines a new direction for the community. These are policies that are forward-looking, they're visionary. So let's make sure that we're not taking a step back from that after you took a step forward. And one of the things about the Lincoln Climate Action Plan, as Marilyn indicated, is protection, making use of natural solutions. And I probably won't say things as well as some of the other people that have spoken already today. Today's one of those days where I'm in total agreement with Don Nelson. I hope he doesn't faint over hearing me say that. But we need to protect those things. We need to follow through on the policies that you yourselves have adopted. In the city of Lincoln, we just had an election, as you all know, and the city of Lincoln just endorsed that. The person who voted against it is no longer on the council. And the people who voted for it are on the council. So let's continue to promote the Lincoln Climate Action Plan. Now let me talk just a little bit about affordable housing. Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light, we support affordable housing. I personally support affordable housing. We've consistently supported policies for reducing low-income people's utility bills. The people at LES are sick and tired of hearing me testify month after month. We need to keep protecting low-income people. We supported LB 306, which was passed by the legislature this year, which would provide more funding for low-income people to pay their utility bills and also reduce their energy usage. And we've also been involved in conversations about affordable housing. That's included conversations with urban development staff, with NeighborWorks, and a couple of developers about how can we do this? How can we create affordable housing that's energy efficient and is affordable? One of the things that concerns me is I hope that there isn't a message that somehow we're pitting affordable housing against preservation of the prairie. As Don said, a prairie's forever. Does that mean I have a minute, or does that mean I'm all
You have a
done?
minute left.
Okay. Yesterday, I went out to visit 9 Mile Prairie, and then on my way back, I was listening to a program on NPR about clear-cutting the forests in northwestern the U.S. in northwestern U.S. and about what a loss that was. Well, we don't have forests here, but we do have prairies, and if they're damaged, it's the same kind of thing. And it's not just the prairie itself; it's the environs around it. And so I think we need to let's make sure that we're preserving an irreplaceable natural resource, or as some people would put it, we're all related to everything living. So let's take care of that relationship as well. And then I guess the final thing that I would say is, I'm an attorney and I've looked at the statutes and I don't see how you can call. Can I complete my statement, please? I don't see how a blight designation, how native prairie can meet the statutory criteria for a blight designation. I think that would be an invitation to a legal challenge. So I guess I hope, and I guess the final thing, if I could just say one more thing. I keep hearing new things, as Marilyn said. I mean, there was stuff that I learned today. It's like, hold on, how does that fit in all of this? I think we need some more time for everybody to figure out what's going on here and figure out what the appropriate next steps, and hopefully everybody can come away with something that they can live with. So thank you for your attention. I'd be glad to respond to questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Winston? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this item?
Yes. Jake Hoppy, 5631 South 48th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. You may know my more prevalent partner, Fred Hoppy, who's been vocal on this topic. Yeah. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I think that the testimony today is really because you have two very laudable goals that you're thinking about and considering together, and both are very important policy objectives for the city. And I think the challenge here is sort of conflating what is being presented as a tension between development and affordable housing with, I think, the question that you were kind of getting at with the city staff, which is that this is already zoned R5 and R3. The zoning by right presents the opportunity to do development. Removing from the Blight Study does not eliminate that right or take this or preserve this for prairie. It just ensures that it takes away a very large incentive that a developer has to bring a redevelopment plan forward to you that you approve of and support and think balances the policy objectives of the city with the development that's being proposed. And that's setting this land up to be included, as Mr. Marvin was clear about. The blight designation lets you set up a redevelopment plan, which then lets you set up a redevelopment agreement. It certainly doesn't ensure that a redevelopment agreement will happen. But it does not, not including this in the blight, obviously the most salient point there is that it does not mean it's preserved as prairie. It means it can move forward with sort of unincentivized development that is most likely going to be market rate of nature. So I think the challenge here is that finding sites that are appropriate for affordable housing is extremely challenging. Blight designation and the ability to at some point come back before you and present a plan that says, hey, we're going to build to these levels of affordability. We have a gap, and we'd like TIF to help support that gap, is a critical screening mechanism for us in identifying new sites. I think when I think about the challenge, I think even, come before you just talk about Gatehouse, that's a plan that we worked very hard over last year to do, was approved Q1 of this year. It probably won't start having an impact on the city until Q1 of 2023. It's just such a long lead time in order to bring projects forward, that to remove potential sites for projects at this stage of the game so severely limits, if you think of you have a portfolio effect of what you want to see. You have an effect that might meet different policy objectives that are more salient at a future time, because you don't know exactly where, not all affordable housing is created equal. You might be trying to achieve certain policy objectives with that affordable housing at a future date, and TIF would give you a very powerful incentive to make sure you are able to achieve that objective in the future. But really, you're thinking of a project that might be 2 to 4 years in the future. And I want to be clear, we certainly don't have, we're not ready to bring a project forward. We don't have control over this land. We're just an interested party that maybe we'll have an opportunity to bid on this and bring something forward. I hope that we would. Maybe it's another affordable housing developer. I hope that they would. We need more folks focused on it. Just the last piece that I would comment on is that these elements are not always in such great tension. The Affordable Housing Act and the Climate Action Plan are intricately linked when you read them. I mean, one sort of relies on the other, and certainly they comment on each other. The Gatehouse project, we're working hard with Lincoln Electric System and our engineers to identify enhanced efficiencies that we can include and incorporate in the project, really so we can pass the benefits of that to the tenants. It's not preserving virgin prairie, but it is, identifying ways where development and the Climate Action Plan can be married together to produce a more effective project, and maybe a model that can be adopted by other market rate developers as well. So that's the end of my comments. I'll take any questions if there are any, but appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hoppy?
Thanks.
Okay, seeing none, thank you so much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item?
My name is Mark Hansen. I live at 3921 Firethorn Court. I am a private citizen, formerly and now a retired banker, and in my free time since retirement, I've been spending a little time on the city's Affordable Housing Action Plan as a private citizen. Today's front page story really motivated me to come speak for my first council meeting in my 40-plus years of living here in Lincoln. And I am speaking in favor of the extreme blight designation of the subject property. I think the designation is consistent with the current zoning of the property, and it will help the community achieve the affordable housing action plan that's in place that the whole community is working together to try and develop. And it'll do that, as Jake pointed out, by increasing funding options for this property with these tax incentives. Finally, I just say I'm confident that the City Council, the city departments will act prudently, as they always do, to protect the environmental concerns balanced with the housing needs we have in the community. They are not mutually exclusive, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Mr. Hansen? Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Okay.
I have staff questions.
Yep. So, did you have something you wanted to provide? Okay.
So my name's Deanna Elliker. My address is 4030 North 57th, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm power of attorney for my mother, Eileen Elliker, and I'm here representing her. She has interest in the property located in this housing development, which is an antiquated housing development. And I had spoken with James about a proposed plan earlier on, but it was just very informal. So I'd like to just disclose that we had an ex parte conversation, whatever it's called. Anyway, I'm sorry. I only found out about the meeting like at 3 minutes after 3. So I was out in my garden, and I really like to apologize for my appearance and my lack of preparation for the discussion. Generally, we get some kind of a letter that says there's action on our property, and we did not receive that. So I was unaware. But what I'd like to discuss is I actually have been involved working with the city planning department, urban development, watershed, LTU. I actually contacted the ombudsman for the mayor because I just don't get any action. So this development, Airport Heights First Edition, blocks 1, 2, 3, and 4, were established and plotted, approved by the city council in 1952. Those lots were all sold to separate individuals, and since there's at least 12 or 13 different owners, one of which is the city of Lincoln. They own one lot. That's part of the drainage system. So I brought forth just a potential plan for this area. We own 96 of the lots of 108 lots. And we've been paying taxes on those lots. My mom got her original lot in 1952. And I'm just curious, is there taxes being paid on 9 Mile Prairie? Is there a tax process for 9 Mile Prairie, collecting taxes on 9 Mile Prairie? I'll give that to the lawyer. I mean, I don't know. But my question is, I'm totally for saving 9 Mile Prairie. I'm very conscientious of our environment and our climate, and I incorporated probably more things than most do into that preliminary plan that I brought to the city council, or the city planning and urban development, and we don't seem to be able to move forward with that. And they told me that the boundary was Northwest 56th Street. So I tried to get the entire Airport Heights First Edition included in this blight study because it meets by the state statute extreme blight. It's a housing development that's antiquated. There are multiple homeowners, and so there's no development process. The city won't provide any utilities and then do special assessments. So if the homeowners won't all get in agreement and make a development plan, there's no moving forward. All access for street access on Northwest 56th Street was removed, they told me, but then when somebody wanted to sell their land, all of a sudden then they did have addresses, so they had access. But all of the lots along Northwest 50 or Adams Street were removed. So there's 33 lots there that have no street access, no potential for development, and it's the city created the problem for us. And we have no authority to do anything because we don't own every one of the lots in this development. So I came forth to look for help, and I don't feel I had any satisfaction with that. So I think that the planning and the city council should postpone your vote today to look further into some of the issues that others have brought up, and the fact that this is a potential, there's 108 lots sitting right here ready for development. It could be a low-income housing development. I brought forth a 55 and older plan. With COVID, it's been very difficult for conversations, and I emailed, and I was supposed to have some kind of a group meeting, Zoom or whatever, scheduled back in February, and I haven't heard a thing. So I contacted the ombudsman. The ombudsman told me that they wouldn't want to include this particular part of the property here because there were no houses on it, and it wouldn't be fair to the city because of TIF, the exposure for TIF money, if this was included in the blight study. But this particular housing development meets the extreme blight condition. It's just not annexed into the city. So what I had spoken with James about was the potential for and the urban development for bringing the rest of the development into the city limits and then including into the blight study. So that's my issue with that. Like I said, I'm all for protecting 9 Mile Prairie and providing whatever's needed for that. But 9 Mile Prairie, if they don't pay taxes, we've been paying taxes for almost 70 years with no potential to build a house on any of the lots that we own. And that's just not fair.
Are there any questions? Councilman Beckius?
Yes. Have you requested for the property to be annexed by the city of Lincoln?
I went to urban development. I don't know where else you go. I suppose you have to get a lawyer and go through the formal process, but I think you shouldn't have to. You should go to urban development, start there, and move through the process like developers do.
Could you give me about an approximate time frame of that request?
February?
Okay, thank you.
I've been in the office, though, for over the last 5 years, in and out with different questions, different plans, different... Anyway.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any
Anyone
further
else?
questions?
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item before we go to the city side for rebuttal? Okay, seeing none, I would ask if Director Marvin or Director Carey or if Mickey Apposito would like to come up. And if there was any statements that they would like to make, and then make themselves available for any questions from the council.
Dan Marvin, Urban Development, 555 South 10th Street. I think it was good discussion. I absolutely agree. We don't want to pit one interest against another and use the divide and conquer method. It's not our interest. On the issue that was just brought up, though, I do know there were some conversations with someone in our office about that particular development. I don't know exactly where they've been left off, and I will follow up on that. As it relates to the Blight Study, though, and I'm not trying to do a catch-22 on this, but the truth is we don't blight outside the city limits, so that would have been the reason why we wouldn't have extended blight out that area. And I think typically annexation agreements are done through the planning department, but that's no excuse on the city if we didn't properly communicate all of the different departments that need to be worked with. On the other issues, I think we've kind of touched base on a lot of the different things. I will say, because I was looking at the Belmont district that was approved and was done rather easily. The city did have property that runs along I-180. So the western border on the Belmont was the interstate park that runs along I-180, and that was included in the Blight Study. Not because we're going to sell the property and do some tax increment financing, but it does avail us the ability to do things within that park if it were to make sense, and to be able to ask for developers to make contributions within the development area. And we've done that a lot of different times. So, and the only other thing that I'll bring up, because it did bring home, I think, the two competing interests here. This was a conversation that I had with Marilyn, and Marilyn said that I don't know that she had a huge problem with blight, but what blight implied to her was that there was a higher and better use for the property that's over there, and other than it being prairie. And I thought that was a fair comment that Marilyn made. And so I think those are the competing interests between here. Are we trying to incentivize through blight opportunities to develop land and convert it from being prairie? Or are we doing as we did with the Belmont study, including areas that are open space so that we can then extend resources into those areas to help the parkland or other areas that we might be able to do to help mitigate whatever happens up in the Arnold Heights area. And I think that, to me, is the way I contextualize the two different competing forces here.
Are there any questions for Director Marvin at this point? Councilman Shob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Marvin, I appreciate you coming forward. I agree with you. This has been an enlightening and healthy conversation. I'm still a little confused by the map. Do you have an illustration of your original overlay of where we plan for the blight?
The one that is unamended would go up to Fletcher Street.
And Mr. Winston talked about not blighting the prairie. Is the prairie included in the original blight overlay?
The 9 Mile Prairie does not touch any of the area of the city limits. 9 Mile Prairie is, I think Kurt did a map, it's 2,550 feet from the city limits border. We don't go outside the city limit border, so roughly it's 9 Mile Prairie is a half a mile down the road from there.
And then the university environment study of 9 Mile Prairie, the blight areas within that.
Yes, the environs study has an area that I think, David can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it goes down Northwest 48th Street. The environs study that's in the 9 Mile Prairie plan envisions a lot of different things. It identifies the zoning that's there. It identifies the existing housing that's there, businesses that are there. I think it does a really good job of trying to identify the resources there and how the city should, contemplate how it impacts as it grows into that area.
And last question. All these things are important conversations, but today we're talking about blight and extreme blight and the designation for a plot of land, several plots of land. That's our agenda item today. Is that for?
Yeah, the agenda that you have before you is a blight study that we hired Hannah Keelan to do the report that assesses that the area that is designated as blighted meets the state of Nebraska statutes for designating something as blighted. And then overlaid on top of that is the extreme blight designation, which was done by our staff to identify basically unemployment poverty issues within that area that would then meet the state statute for declaring that area extremely blighted. And those two elements are necessary for someone who wanted to acquire a house and get a $5,000 tax credit.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Director Marvin at this time? Okay, I would then ask if Director Carey has any statements that he would like to make, and see if there's any council members that would have any questions for him.
I'd say Dan covered some of the things I was going to say. I'd just avail myself to any other questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Director Carey? Councilman Shob?
So, just to be clear, I want you to help me understand. Are we rezoning land today?
No.
Are we approving a development agreement today?
No.
What are we doing today?
What was just discussed. I mean, this is the item before you is the identification of blighted and substandard for a particular area and determining what that area should be.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Director Carey? Okay, seeing none, I would then ask Mickey Esposito to come on up and see if there's any council members that have any questions for Mickey. Councilwoman Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Esposito, I have a question. In emails that have come across, our computer screens and even today, people have talked about a decision to designate blight as being antithesis to the Climate Action Plan, which we had approved earlier this year. Could you please address that?
I sure can, and I understand the concerns, absolutely, as all of you do. In the Climate Action Plan, it strongly encourages maximizing natural climate solutions. One of those solutions is prairie, but a blight designation and the Climate Action Plan, or even trying to maximize those solutions, they're not mutually exclusive one versus the other. They can work together, and in this case, we could make it work together. So in my estimation, should development take place on this property, then the blight designation or extreme blight designation actually helps further the goals of the Climate Action Plan, because there's so much more we can do and have tools at our that we can use to actually be above and beyond floodplain regulations, above and beyond land use regulations. We can actually add additional environmental protection in that redevelopment plan.
Councilwoman Raybould?
Well, Mickey, I know you said that these two things are not mutually exclusive, and that we can work together, and Don Nelson said we could come up with creative solutions working together and listening to different ideas. Can you give some examples where the city of Lincoln has done exactly that, come up with creative solutions about mirroring parks with developments and tying the two together to really appreciate our natural resources and beauty and tying it into development?
Absolutely, and Jacob kind of mentioned a few that we're working on with them with respect to energy efficiency. But in this case, and I do like these maps because I want to help identify what would happen in the event of development, and how sort of riparian areas would be protected through floodplain standards already. In the riparian areas throughout this area, there would be minimum corridors established, and that's not just for the protection of stormwater or flood waters that are going through these drainage areas, but also for wildlife as they connect, as habitats are connected. There are floodplain standards, drainage criteria manuals. There are setbacks and minimum corridors that have to be adhered to. And so as you see sort of these drainage ways through here, there are a minimum set of regulations in which to protect the areas. But what a redevelopment plan allows us to do, in addition to these protections, is that we can negotiate even further setbacks. We can negotiate things such as landscapes and what's incorporated around the development. I also like that we've done in the past maintenance agreements that would even limit where you mow, low mow and no mow areas. We can also restrict chemical fertilizer application rates and pesticide applications through maintenance agreements. There can be conservation areas that are established through a redevelopment plan. So essentially creating natural landscape buffers around there and requiring sort of indigenous and native type landscape plans to come forward. So I know it's not everything that folks want, but if we're looking for a way to work together with development, should development occur here, the redevelopment plan is so much more helpful to give us enhanced tools in which to work, not just the floodplain regulations, but a little bit beyond that. And then the TIF incentives are super helpful to pay for them.
Are there any further questions for Councilman Beckius?
Yes. And once again, can you, Mickey, detail for us, should the area be blighted, extremely blighted, a developer comes along but chooses not to use TIF, the tools that you just mentioned, how many of those tools can you use in order to protect the issues that we're talking about today?
It's subject to negotiation with the developer, and if there's a construct around affordable housing, I don't know why they would not use TIF, in fact, but...
Well, let's just say, for instance, it's just market rate housing.
Yeah, well, we would have to, it would be subject to negotiation through a plan, but the benefit of that is it comes back to this body, and knowing how precious this land is and this debate that's happening about it, it would require another level of scrutiny, and I think Dan was talking a little bit about that.
Sure, but can you mention other redevelopment plans that you're aware of that, say, for instance, scrutinize mowed areas or the type of fertilizer being used? I mean, that's a level of detail traditionally not afforded redevelopment plans unless there is TIF associated with a project.
That's true. There has to be an incentive or an agreement, and as those things come forward. So subject to negotiation for sure. And
the only reason I mention it is simply because not that I'm against blighting the area, not that I'm against development of the area. I just don't want to hang my hat upon something in the future that may not occur and then make people upset saying that there was a potential or that we said that a redevelopment agreement could protect things when, once again, that option may not be at our disposal.
And
going
I'm
forward.
saying the same thing. I'm not saying develop it, don't develop it. I'm saying if it's inevitable that it will be developed, then we're in a better position if there is a redevelopment plan in place, which is triggered by the extreme blight designation.
If the developer uses TIF.
If the developer uses TIF, that's fair.
Councilwoman Raybold?
Mickey, can you talk a little bit about watershed management? I mean, that's certainly a very effective tool, no matter if you're doing market rate housing, you have to abide by certain standards of watershed management.
Absolutely, and those are very robust in Lincoln. We have very good rules for protection of these drainage ways. And as you know from the Climate Action Plan process, the drainage criteria manual is going through another iteration to take climate into account because precipitation rates are showing to be higher. You saw the 2050 comp plan process and what David had showed you in those areas, those riparian areas, and how important, and those critical habitats, how important they are in the comp plan process as well. So we do have some robust ways of protecting and preserving those areas and creating natural corridors and natural landscapes as a buffer.
And just one last thought. It's not really a question, but it seems like we get a lot of these issues before us with neighborhoods pitted against development. And I've seen neighborhoods be the most forceful and powerful tool working against a development by requiring greater setbacks, greater landscaping, greater, deeper easements of protection for certain properties. So obviously we've had a great group of people come and state their concerns and reasons, and I see no reason why they wouldn't show up back in force, full force, if there is a market rate development being discussed, and making sure that they force that private developer to insist on appropriate watershed management or appropriate easements and setbacks and appropriate natural landscaping. So, I mean, there are tools. It's not necessarily the city has all the tools, but, the neighbors have quite a few tools as well.
Sure. The only response I would say is that we're talking about pieces of ground that are zoned and annexed by the city. The typical city tools in terms of watershed or appropriateness could be followed, but on the other hand, we're talking about land that's ready to go. And my concern is that a neighborhood's point of view may not be particularly relevant because we've gone down that road already to a certain extent.
Councilwoman Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to that point, regardless if it's market value or affordable housing, part of the Climate Action Plan is urban agriculture. And so how can we weave that in? I mean, and back
Absolutely.
to the neighbors, the Arnold Heights Neighborhood Association meets tomorrow night, and I am quite sure I'll be there. I know Councilman Shove is planning to attend. I'm sure given today's hearing and the great news article we've had, I doubt that many people knew about this whole issue until recently. And so I think we need better assurances from all of us. We all have to be ready to respond and carry out those promises. And so I guess I would like your response to urban agriculture and how can we, that's a component of the Climate Action Plan, how can we weave that in? Is that even possible? I mean, how much of this are we going to be serious about?
That's a wonderful thought. Again, as a tool in our toolbox with a redevelopment plan and a structure in that regard, those are the types of things that we can incentivize and negotiate. And the TIF agreement in that construct is enforceable. So if developers aren't making good on their TIF agreements, then those things can be put into place, like urban ag. But outside of that, outside of a redevelopment plan, a potential use of TIF and a TIF agreement, we don't have these tools. And I think that's important. I also appreciate that folks have testified to slow things down, to talk through some of these issues. This is your district, Councilperson Ward, and I think the communication is important because the Climate Action Plan is relatively new, as is the Affordable Housing Plan, and this is our first test of how those things work together. A year ago, we weren't having this debate about climate, and I think just this is a test of what the policy is, as well as the affordable housing policy. So I think it's a win for all of us that we're actually having these conversations, and if we need to have further conversations, then so be it. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mickey Esposito? Anything else you want to throw out there for the good of the cause?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to close the public hearing on that item. We got 3 other items we're going to go to before we enter the voting session on these resolutions. So we have 3 more public hearings to go through, and then we'll vote on the resolution and any sort of changes that there might be on that. So with that being said, may we please move on to the next item?
Item 5C is Comprehensive Plan Conformance 21012, application of the Urban Development Director for proposed amendments to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan and to the south of downtown redevelopment and strategic plan to add the Sky Park Apartments redevelopment project for the rehabilitation of the existing historical residential structure on property generally located at 1301 Lincoln Mall.
Good afternoon, Dan Marvin, Urban Development, 555 South 10th Street. Spent a lot of time just talking about tax increment financing. So this is another step in that process. This is a plan amendment to 2 redevelopment plans. One is the south of downtown redevelopment, and one is the Lincoln Center downtown development. And what this is an older building that is on the historic register called Sky Park, and it is situated here along 13th Street, and the project area, the area that's being identified where we can spend tax increment financing, is down Lincoln Mall to 14th Street, and then around the half block that encompasses that building. And I'm going to cut to my favorite picture that I have. This is just timeless. So what this is there's a bomb shelter in that building, and if you'll notice, there's some people that are sleeping up here because obviously there's been a something that's triggered that people need to go. There's a gentleman back there working in the kitchen, and then there's people that are just taking it all in, like because they don't have a care in the world because they're safely inside their bomb shelter. And I think even one person's having a cigarette. So that's a picture from the 1960s. You won't see that today. And so it's in your packet too. The picture's available there. So this went through Planning Commission on a unanimous vote. I think it was on consent agenda. And we think it's an opportunity to bring a building back to what it was in the 60s, maybe without the bomb shelter. I don't know. I can ask the developer about that. But I think it's a way of bringing a building back, showing that we're going to have some rehab in an area of town that needs it. I think they'll expand the number of units from 75 units to 82. Some had been previously merged. They provide parking in the area. They've had challenges with the balconies and how to bring the building back to its original luster. I think it's challenged. I don't know if the elevators have been fixed in there. I don't think anyone's actually currently living in the building. But I will leave that to the developer to come up and add some comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Director Marvin at this time? Councilman Shob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Marvin, thank you. That the bomb shelter art was fun. Yeah. I had a couple constituents and residents of our community ask about, as they do often, and I'd like you to address affordable housing and the granting of TIF. Is there anything we can do to ensure that in this process? Was that conversation had?
So the discussions, I know that the developer's attorney has been both to the DLA board and to the South of Downtown board. And what we think we'll be able to do to address some of those concerns is to take funds and put them into a rehab program, much like we did a rehab program up in Havelock, but this would be a rehab program for many of the older apartments that are in the Soto neighborhood. And we will then be able to use those resources to help rehab other buildings as this building is being rehabbed. We think that that enhances and serves the goals of the South of Downtown redevelopment plan.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions for Director Marvin? Councilwoman Raybold?
Director Marvin, could you talk a little bit about the current parking? You said people just park in the neighborhood?
No.
Oh.
The building does provide its own parking. So they have parking within the building.
And how many parking stalls?
I'm going to have to ask you to ask Kent that question. I believe they adequately provide the number of stalls presently.
Any further questions for Director Marvin? Okay, seeing none, thanks so much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item?
Good afternoon. My name's Kent Seacrest, representing Sky Park Lincoln LLC, whose principals are John Sampson and Corey Vokoon. Corey Vokoon and Allison Albers are also here today, so if you ask some really tough questions, I'll turn to them for their answers. This project is very unique. Built in 1963, you saw the bomb shelter pictures. There's other great pictures and descriptions of how luxurious and innovative this was in 1963 as a dwelling unit, and who's who that lived there along the way. What's also very interesting is this building is on the National Register of Historic Places. And that's a very, tough standard and qualified because of its unique architectural style. It's 12 stories high, so this is probably the second largest historic registered building besides the Capitol in Lincoln, and it takes a lot of resources. If you've ever tried to rehab an historic building, it's an extra high standard. You must do it exactly in character of the building that was done in 1963. In fact, one of the little stories I'd like to tell you is I'm showing an image of the railings, just to give you a flavor of what we've had to go through. The bottom three railings are actually, this is a composite drawing. The bottom three railings are the railings there today. The problem is the distance between the rails is too great and small children can fall through. So we thought, well, let's make it smaller. And of course, the first position was, no, that's not in character. Well, to the State Office, Historic Preservation Officer and the National Park Service, they came to realize that if we did the top version, you can see the upper ones just have different spacing. If we did the top version, apparently we have child protection, but yet it looks closer to the bottom three sets of rails. That's just one example of the characteristics that we have to go through to make this happen. This is a $13.3 million project. The TIF's about $1.3 million that could be generated that's in the redevelopment plan. We are increasing the number of units. It originally was designed as 81, but then they combined it down to 75, the top units, so they're bigger. We're going to go back to the 81 so we can create more housing for the area and for downtown to go forward with. We are removing lots of hazardous materials. We are bringing everything up to code and security measures. COVID, all those type of protections that people now need. We are doing a full renovation. As a result, we had to ask all the tenants to disappear. They didn't disappear. They obviously went someplace, and we offered them Sampson's. They have a bunch of nice apartments. We've offered every one of them a replacement unit that wanted one. We also then are asking and giving the right for every tenant that was in the building to come back in if they want to, and protect them on the same rent along the way. And the amount of money that we are paying, that we are proposing to pay the city in our redevelopment agreement, which is coming forward in the next short month or two, is $285,000. Now, what that represents is 10% of the units is 8 units. We are saying for the next 20 years, there's a difference between market rate and what a 60% area mean income rate is, which is defined as low income. And we take that rent differential and we say not only is the rent based on what a 60% AMI person can afford, but we're saying those same people can only spend 30% of their income on housing, even though most of this neighborhood is spending a lot more than 30% for affordable housing. So we take that, which makes it even more expensive, and we take it out, bring it back to present value, and you get $285,000, give or take. So we are paying that to the city, so they then can create this south of downtown rental rehab fund, which is very helpful because 93% of the neighborhood is rental. And they are lots and lots of units that are not meeting code, and this will allow the city to bring up even those type of units to meet the code along the way. Bottom line is staff is recommending approval of these 2 amendments, one's to the downtown plan, one's to the south of downtown plan. And Planning Commission, as Dan indicated, recommend approval on the consent agenda. DLA board unanimously went on record in support. South of Downtown Community Development Organization wrote a letter indicating the project is consistent with the recently adopted South of Downtown redevelopment plan and strategy. And there to date has been no opposition that I know of. And so we'd ask for your support. Any questions?
Councilwoman Raybold?
Can you please talk a little bit about the parking? I see it says currently there are 58 covered above grade parking stalls. Are you going to be adding more as you expand the number of apartments?
The first thing we've had to do is we had an emergency. Parts of the underground parking were literally ready to fall in. And you've seen the news lately about these type of issues. So we've gone in and done major expensive repairs to keep the 58 stalls active and used. We think given the people that will live here, first of all, it's B4, so we don't have to provide any parking. We're doing 54 on site. We think that ratio will work out very well because we think a lot of our renters are going to be walking downtown to their jobs, and so, or Ubering or whatever we do these days. So we think the market's going to be a really good mix. If we're wrong, we have the parking lot to the south that we could use, if we're wrong. Now someday I think the parking lot to the south will be redeveloped. But until we think that through and work about it, we got more parking than we know what to do with in the area right now on site. So we don't want to be a bad neighbor. We know, studying the state of Nebraska office parking is a problem. They park in the neighborhood. We're not that type of neighbor.
So is the developer going to be spending money to restore the parking facilities? Okay.
Because they're emergency, we're doing it right now. Okay. Because we do not need the building or parts of the building to collapse and injure somebody. So we're doing emergency repairs as we speak.
And then you hope to have at least 54 parking stalls available?
Yes.
If not more?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Seacrest at this time? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item?
My name is Robert Kozelka, Kuzelka. I live in 1935 A Street. I did not come to this hearing for this purpose. I came for the other one. But I couldn't resist the temptation. In 1960, I was a student of architecture at the University of Nebraska when this building was being proposed. The then planning director, it had to have an exemption in zoning because of height. And the then planning director tried to get public support to cause the building to be lower and could get none. Doug Brogdon, who's some names, you and I are too old, right?
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, my question though came up is, and as I listened to Mr. Seacrest name the various groups this is through, has this gone through the environmental committee? The Environment Committee, and that's a question for Marv, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you so much. Anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, Director Marvin, would you like to provide a rebuttal?
Well, just to say that it's gone through all the regulatory reviews and it is in the capital environment.
Any questions for Director Marvin? Seeing none, thank you so much. Then we'll go ahead and move on to our next item, please. Councilman McGinnis?
Yes, Chairman, out of an abundance of caution, I will declare a potential conflict on the next item, 5D, and will not participate in any discussion or vote.
Sounds good. I'll tell you what, how about we do this just to be conservative time? We'll go ahead and move on with 5E, if that works, on our agenda, and then we'll do 5D after that. So that way, if you want to come and join us for 5E, because then we'll take a break after we get to our public hearing. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to item 5E on our agenda, and then we will do 5D after that. And then once we get to our public hearing, there's been a request to do a 5-minute break. So we'll go ahead and come up, and then we're going to hold off on yours, Director Johnson.
Item 5E is approving appropriations in the amount of $19,409,893 received from federal CARES to public safety reimbursement funds.
Brian Jackson, Acting Chief of Police, 575 South 10th.
Dave Engler, Fire Chief, 1801 Q Street.
Just wanted to give the council an opportunity once again to review the potential expenditures. This is reimbursements of salaries spent between March 1st, 2020 and May 31st, 2020, authorized by Congress, signed into law by President then Trump. We applied for these funds in late summer, early fall. Were approved for those funds, and this would allow then the expenditures of those funds. And our opportunity today is to provide you some overview, again, generally of what those expenditures would be. For the police department, I'll just hit those real quick. And I'm not going to be real specific because some of these things are not in the contract. And what I don't want to do is anybody that may be doing business with the city to know potentially what kind of money is in play. So there is a replacement of our RMS system, our records management system, which a portion of these funds will go to. We have a number of building projects, including remodel of a building in the northeast part of town, as well as updating in a number of our other properties. We have some technology items that are in play, and by and large, those are the large expenditures. Our communication center has technology expenditures as well as furnitures, fixtures, and equipment for a new communications center, which will be co-located with the Northeast Team Station. All of those things identified as expenditures for these monies. These monies are identified largely for one-time expense items that they won't regenerate. This is one-time cost. There are other monies associated to the CARES Act that go to the city. These are specific to first responders reimbursement, and this is why our first responders are requesting expenditures associated to these funds.
Yep. And for Lincoln Fire and Rescue, we're going to concentrate a large number of those funds on refurbishing, remodeling our fire stations that we've shown are in states of disrepair, as well as apparatus, some of our fire apparatus to keep up on that plan so we don't have a situation in which we've got a lot of them breaking down at once. And then some equipment purchases on the EMS side.
Are there any questions for any of the chiefs? Okay, seeing none. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, you get a head start on our break, Councilman McGinnis.
Thank you.
And then we'll move into 5D, and then once we've completed this public hearing, then we'll take a 5-minute break.
Good evening, Lynn Johnson with Lincoln Parks and Recreation, and I'm being joined by Tara Knuth, who is the director of the Lincoln Children's Museum. The action before the City Council this afternoon is a proposal to essentially approve the Children's Museum subleasing some unused space in the Children's Museum, and I'll provide a little bit of background. As the City Council may know, the city owns the building that is occupied by the Lincoln Children's Museum. There is a lease and management agreement that was established in 1988. That agreement includes a provision that says that any unused space may be sublet by the Children's Museum with approval of the City Council. So obviously that's why we're here this afternoon. The rental proceeds from subletting are to be used by the Lincoln Children's Museum for operation and equipping of the museum. And with that, I'm going to let Tara talk a little bit about the specifics of this agreement, or of the proposed sublet agreement with UNL.
Great. I'm Tara Knuth, Lincoln Children's Museum, 1420 P Street. So this agreement is with the University of Lincoln College of Journalism, which is right across Centennial Mall from us, so in a great location. And it will be used by the Yacht group to help kind of in their expansion of space that they were needing. They used to be in the downtown area. The agreement is set to start on August 1st. It is a 5-year agreement going through August 31st of 2026. And then be up for renewal for additional 5 years at that time, and then to be negotiated again after that, if so needed. This is a space that we were not using. It is something that during COVID and the pandemic last year became a necessity for the museum to start looking outside the box for additional funding opportunities and kind of diversify our revenue a little bit. So this is a great opportunity, and to be in partnership with the university is, and another nonprofit with the university is a great opportunity too.
Are there any questions? Councilwoman Washington?
Thank you very much for coming down. I may have actually been in this part of the building before a long time ago, but I'm just curious, so help me to remember correctly. Is there a separate entrance for this space, or is there any interaction between the proposed tenant and the museum, like where the children are and the exhibits?
There is a separate entrance, kind of an employee entrance off the parking lot, where they'll be able to go all the way up to the 3rd floor. There would be potential for interaction because there's a shared elevator that they would be able to use and be accessible to them. So we put additional security measures in place, as well as kind of part of our agreement is that they are not coming out onto the floors in those areas, that they'd only be using the elevator and then that one staircase up to the 3rd floor.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will take a recess until 5:30, at which point we will come back and vote on resolutions. In order for Councilman McGinnis to join us, we will start first with 5E on our voting on resolutions, and then we'll start back. We're going to start with 5D when we come back. So then Councilman McGinnis will join us, and then after 5D, we'll do 5A and B. Thank you so much.
Are we voting?
Yep, we're going to enter the voting session, and we're going to start with item 5D, so that way Councilman McGinnis can join us for the rest of it.
Okay. Item 5D is approving a consent to sublease agreement and assignment and non-disturbance and recognition agreement between the Board of Regents of the University of Nebraska Lincoln's Children's Museum and the City of Lincoln to sublease the third floor of the building occupied by the museum to the UNL College of Journalism, introduced by Shob.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Warren?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
McGinnis?
No.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Thank you for answering. Shob?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Okay.
Should have said nope.
So much fun.
Okay, item 5A is miscellaneous 21006, application of the Urban Development Director declaring the Northwest 48th Street redevelopment area generally bound by Fletcher Avenue on the north, Northwest 57th Street on the west, Holdridge Street on the south, and Northwest 48th Street on the east as blighted and substandard, introduced by Shob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Councilman Ward, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to, when we get to the voting session on both 5A and 5B, move to delay both items until July 26th with another continued public hearing. And may I just say a couple of words now?
That's your motion, right? Or you?
Yes.
Second?
I guess so. Yes. Okay.
Second.
So moved. Yes. Thank you. But what I would want to say is I think we had a really productive public hearing today. The article in today's paper, thank you, Margaret Reese. I think that's the best, thank you, summary I've read, and I think it brought a lot of clarity to a lot of people today. To Marilyn McNabb's point, it has been confusing. There's been a lot of maps flying around. Someone else said we need to slow the train down, so we're doing that. Mr. Nelson said, we're not going to get everything we want. I don't know, Don Nelson left.
No,
so there you are. Okay. That's true. We're not all going to get everything we want. And so it's going to be some compromises coming ahead. And lastly, I just want to say, in terms of the article, he's not here today that I'm aware of, but Dave Woodine, I think I'm saying that right. David Carey tried to teach me how to say Mr. Woodine's last name. Is that close, Woodine? He's actually the director of the 9 Mile Prairie. He's at the university, conducted the study. I'm going to go back to Margaret's article, but this is what I hope for, and I think that this gentleman said it best when he talked about his position on the 9 Mile Prairie master plan, and he said in the article that it's an excellent resource that should help planners. It doesn't need to adhere to a rigid dichotomy of development or no development. Instead, planners should find a creative solution. Please know, well, there's an exception. We have a couple planners, but the city council, we're not the planners. But he did say, I would hope that the plan addresses the needs of all stakeholders, what's good for the school, what's good for the taxpayer, and creating more good housing, and also creating more green space. I hope that we can get there in the next couple of weeks on this issue. I know that's not a lot of time. It's more than some people wanted. It's not as much as some of my colleagues had asked for. Councilman Shob had offered a month delay. And I know other issues we need to talk about in terms of the prairie and other issues happening in that district will take far longer than 2 weeks. But so with that said, I hope that my colleagues, I've talked to each of them, will support this delay till July 26th. So thank you all for being here and your very wise testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman made a motion. It was seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Thank you for your thoughtful words, Councilwoman Ward. Councilwoman Raybold, you're recognized.
I'm going to support this delay because I'm hopeful Woman Sandra Washington is working on clarity with some of the maps, and so that we hope to be able to send those out and get some input and feedback from lots of the stakeholders so that we can come up with a creative solution on this matter. So I will support the delay.
Are there any other, Councilwoman Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was probably noticeably quiet this afternoon during this topic, but I have been doing a lot of reading and a lot of research, and I've had a lot of emails and communications with many people who are supportive of the 9 Mile Prairie, as well as people who are very interested in affordable housing and conservation blended together. I am looking forward to spending some time making the maps more clear, and also sitting at the table with multiple parties to make certain that we have an opportunity to be very clear about what it is we can do today and what we could do together later than the end of July. So I look forward to those conversations in the next couple of weeks, and I am glad for a chance to have more conversation. Thank you.
Any further comments? Okay, may we please do a roll call vote on Councilwoman Ward's, I'm sorry.
Point of question. You said that we're just delaying the vote and we're not continuing public hearing.
And to continue public hearing.
And to continue.
Because there will be other plans to come, I believe, Councilman, so.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you for the clarification, Councilman McGinnis. May we please do a roll call vote on Councilwoman Ward's motion to delay?
I have a question, just to be
Yes.
sure, for item 5A and 5B, we'll vote for both to continue public hearing and action 2 weeks until July 26th. Is that correct?
That's my intent, yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Beckius,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 5C is Comprehensive Plan Conformance 21012, application of the Urban Development Director for proposed amendments to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan and to the South of Downtown redevelopment and strategic plan to add the Sky Park Apartments redevelopment project for the rehabilitation of the existing historical residential structure on property generally located at 1301 Lincoln Mall, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman McGinnis. Any discussion? Councilman McGinnis?
Yeah. This is a good thing, as one of our past colleagues would say, that rehabbing a historic landmark project is really, really tough. And I think we're lucky to have a company like Sampson that's willing to put their money and time and expertise in trying to make this back to what it was, or make it a special project and keep it that way for the downtown area. And I think for the downtown area and for South Downtown, I think this is a win-win for everyone going across. And I want to again say thank you to the Sampson and people willing to put their money into projects like this and to save a historic building like this that many may have let go. So I'm excited.
Hear, hear.
Any further comments? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Washington,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 5E is approving appropriations in the amount of $19,409,893 received from federal CARES to public safety reimbursement funds, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman Washington. Any discussion?
I would like to offer a motion to amend number 1 on this item.
Sorry, my microphone cut off there. Councilman Washington?
I'd like to offer a motion to amend this item to correct the amounts reflected in what was actually deposited from CARES funding.
But you need a second?
I
on that
do.
Motion to amend, right?
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion?
Okay, this is actually just a simple mathematical and accounting correction, just to make certain that we correctly reflect exactly how much money was deposited into the account.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I would, can we please do a roll call vote on the amendment?
Beckius,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, now on the main motion, any discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote on the main motion?
Beckius,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Okay. That concludes our public hearing resolutions. Section 6 is public hearing ordinances, second reading, and related resolutions. Item 6A is approving amendment number 1 to amend and restate interlocal corporation agreement establishing the District Energy Corporation.
Good afternoon. Chris Connolly, Chief Assistant City Attorney, 555 South 10th Street. District Energy Corporation has been spending some time in the last year or so reorganizing and updating its organizational documents, which is a good thing. And earlier this year, or late last year, amended and restated interlocal was approved by both the county and the city, updating some of those necessary items. As they moved on to working on the bylaws, they discovered that there was a slight difference between what they wished to do in terms of notice of meetings and when copies of documents needed to be submitted to board members. And so, excuse me, in seeing that there was a conflict in the interlocal, even in the amended and restated interlocal, it was determined that it would probably make more sense to go ahead and take the reference to these notices and how many copies need to go out of the interlocal and put it into the bylaws. Having that level of detail in the interlocal really isn't necessary. It's a little bit like putting in speed limits into the city charter. Things like that will change depending on what state law may be, and so both parties have agreed that this is something that's more appropriate to put into the bylaws as opposed to the interlocal. And so this amendment that you have before you reflects that it would be moved to the bylaws, but most importantly, everything will continue to be consistent with and compliant with the Open Meetings Act for the state of Nebraska. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to the next section, please.
Ordinance's third reading and related resolutions. Item 7A is Annexation 21002, application of Dominion South LLC to annex approximately 42.51 acres of property generally located at North 106th and O Streets, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman McGinnis. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7B is change of zone 21017, application of Dominion South LLC to amend the zoning designation from AG Agriculture District to R3 Residential District on property generally located at North 106th and O Streets, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Washington. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Raybold,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7C is change of zone 21015, application of Vermass Land Company LLC to amend the zoning designation from O3 Office Park District to B2 Planned Neighborhood Business District on property generally located at Highway 2 and Calvert Street, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman Beckius. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Beckius,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7D is change of zone 21018, application of 4731 West O LLC to amend the zoning designation from AG Agriculture District to H4 Highway Commercial District on property generally located at 4731 West O Street, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman McGinnis. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7E is approving a conditional zoning agreement between the city and 4731 West O LLC for property generally located at 4731 West O Street, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Washington. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Washington,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Our section 8 is resolutions. First readings are items 8A through 8H. Section 9 is ordinances, first readings and related resolutions, items 9A through 9P. Pending list date certain, we have one item, item 10A. And our pending list is items 11A through 11C.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman McGinnis. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Ward,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Washington, McGinnis,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes, we stand adjourned.